Welcome to the Self-Reflections podcast, where real reflections are shared by real people. I'm your host, Klaudia Gebert, and today we are diving deep into a conversation that so many in our community will resonate with: living with chronic pain, and more importantly, finding freedom beyond it. Joining me is Catherine Courtice, a life coach, kinesiologist expert from Canada, whose powerful journey from hopelessness to healing is a testament to what happens when we stop outsourcing our recovery and start looking within. Her book, When Life Gives You Lemons, Choose the Lime, is more than a memoir, it's a call to action. Catherine, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here on an episode.
Thank you, Claudia. It's been a long time waiting, and I'm so excited to get started with you.
Great. Catherine, take us back to the moment you first received your diagnosis. What was going on in your life, and how did you initially respond emotionally and mentally?
Good question. So my diagnosis came from an accident. I was type A personality, mom of the year, 4 young kids. My youngest was 5 at the time. My oldest was 13. I was teaching full time. I was running 4 companies with my husband. My house was immaculate. You would never know that there were 4 kids. Laundry always done, meals always done. You know, that kind of...
The powerhouse mother.
And so one day I was just come home from work. I was dressed. I had my jacket on, my little high-heeled pump boots. We had taken a steak and put it out to marinate on the counter, aerating a bottle of wine in a decanter. And we were renovating, putting a bathroom in our basement. So the vanity came that day and we wanted to open up the box. So I ran upstairs, grabbed a knife out of the kitchen, and as I was walking back towards the stairs, I looked back at my children in the living room, gave them that big mom smile, and I took a step back, not realizing I was already in the staircase. And as I stepped back, I stepped into the stairs and I flew back, and I put my head through the wall, I put my arm through the wall, and I slit my eyelid with the knife. Next thing I remember, I woke up in the hospital. They were trying to put an IV in my arm, excruciating pain because it was broken. They didn't know. And life just changed forever. 45 minutes, I was unconscious. I have zero memory, but I didn't know what to do with myself when I was shoved down, because I was always that person that just got everything done. Nothing could ever stop me. And all of a sudden, I was walking with a walker. I was taking 18 medications a day. I had to wear dark glasses and earplugs and a hat, and I could only lay at a 45-degree angle for comfort. And actually, comfort became my whole life. The symptoms became my whole life. And all of a sudden, I wasn't able to make myself a tea. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't go to my kids' hockey games. All of these things that I used to be able to do just stopped. And my life became so small. So small, it was only around the symptoms that I was feeling. The focus was the next doctor's appointments, the next therapy appointment. What's the next thing that I can do to get rid of my symptoms, medications, but looking outside of myself for everyone else to make me better, and just waiting for that next appointment, waiting for that next therapy, waiting for that. And so my whole schedule, my whole life became completely centered around chronic.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It seems as though in a split second, life really did come crumbling down. Rightly so. In and among all of that, it also sounds like you experienced what we know as an identity rupture, this loss of who you were prior to this accident that then caused a lot of the problems for you. And I can only imagine how much shock and grief and intensity that you had to endure. So it's not just this physical impact, but there's this emotional and psychological component that majority of people sometimes minimize when they talk about chronic pain and the physical impact of an injury of some sort.
Absolutely. It's an invisible weight. No one can see it, but everything is ripped away. And it's almost a systematic rip away. It's like, now I can't do this. Now I can't do this. Now I can't do this. So it's not just the pain. The pain is the central cog, I would say, or the axle, the symptoms that we're experiencing, but it affects our relationships. It affects our vocation. It affects the way we can parent. It affects our self-worth. It affects our identity. It affects our faith. It affects every single thing, that ripple effect of what an accident or what a diagnosis can do to us. How do we then deal with those ripples? Because I got to the point where, I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but one member of my family told my husband to put me in palliative care.
Whoa.
Because I was just in the way. And so this whole idea of identity, my identity was the doer. My identity was the one that did it all. And all of a sudden, I needed people to care for me. And first of all, I didn't know how to allow people to care for me.
No, usually when an overcompensator has to even ask for help, they don't even know how to string the words together.
No. And also, I had put myself in a position before my accident where I was never the one that needed anything. So nobody around me knew how to do that. There was no practicing before. And so it didn't just affect my life. It affected my husband's life. It affected my children's lives. It affected my friends' lives, my parents, my family, everybody's life. And so what do we do with that? Because all of a sudden, we're not the person that we were. All of a sudden, the focus and the drive that we had before in our lives is gone. And we start to feel unheard. We start to feel unseen. We start to feel alone. We start to feel like a burden. And even by the ones that we thought loved us the most. Everything just feels broken. And so how do we fix this ripple?
It's really, and thank you so much for your vulnerability in sharing something you've never shared before. To hear, and rightly so, we're trying to be really kind in understanding the impact that it had on you, but also the impact it had on others. When we teach other people that we are the ones that are going to sacrifice ourselves to make sure everything is running, they have a reliance on that. They don't know any different. And when that then falls apart, it's really hard for then people to take up the roles of the doers when initially they weren't that, so there's this initial phase it can be quite debilitating for all involved, not just the individual like yourself who had then suffered with the accident, which then led to the symptoms that were debilitating you. So I can appreciate that would be hard, but to hear that someone said that and that you were getting in the way, my heart broke as soon as you said that. I can't even imagine what that would have been like for you to know that someone said that.
It was, and this is what I find a lot with people that I coach now, in coaching people who have chronic pain, is what happened to me is a very similar story to what happens to a lot of people when all of a sudden their life shifts and they're no longer this doer. And first of all, they, like I said, they don't know how to ask for help. And it is very vulnerable to all of a sudden be dependent. Like I was dependent on my friends to pick up my kids and take them places. I was dependent on my husband to do things. I was dependent. I had to hire so many people to replace me. You really start to see your value when all of a sudden you can't do things. Because I was hiring someone to do homework with my kids. I was hiring someone to do my laundry. I was hiring someone to cook my meals. I was hiring someone to drive me around. All of these things, there's a lot to it. But the emotional strain within a family unit, my marriage didn't survive it. And I'm not the only one. It's very difficult because everyone has a role, and then all of a sudden your role is stripped from you and nobody knows what to do. Like there's no manual or handbook. And so this is what I help people when I'm coaching people. It's not just about managing symptoms. And this is with my book. The tagline is "When life gives you lemons, choose lime." But the main line is embracing life after diagnosis. And we get to learn how to embrace what's been given to us, because we can stay in an area where all we're focusing on, I call them the lemons, right? And this concept is, it doesn't matter whether it's chronic pain or the loss of your dog or a job that you don't enjoy or a relationship that's failing. All of the concepts that I teach and I coach are across the board useful. It's just that because of my experience of having chronic pain, that's the niche that I have dived into. But when we can learn to embrace our lemons, embrace the things that have happened to us in our lives, and then choose something else, choose something different, we start to take our power back. And this was the thing. I was looking outside of myself, to all the doctors, to all the therapists, to my husband, to do all of these things. You know, I was looking outside of myself and thinking, why is nobody helping me?
And I love that you've identified that, and I definitely want to expand on that in today's episode, because it's so easy for us to very much, because we feel so helpless and hopeless in what we're going through, to then look to external factors, people, situations, to resolve or solve the issue that we're in. And naturally, it very much, leads us down a path of further hurt, disappointment, pain, and so forth and so on. You mentioned, I know, in our discovery call that you felt like a waste on the medical system and were at times given very little hope. How bad did it get for you during those moments, and what did you do to your mindset? What did it do to your mindset over time?
Yeah. My doctor crossed his arms and he leaned up against the wall and he said, Catherine, you're never going to get better. Go home. I'm not sending you to any more therapists, not sending you to any more specialists, not doing any more tests. You're a drain on the medical system. Stop coming to see me. And I say that prescription that he gave me, like that was like him writing a script and saying, here's your prescription, because every doctor that I ever went to handed me a prescription. That's all they ever did, was hand me a prescription, and I was taking 18 medications a day. Those 18 medications a day were not giving me any more quality of life than before I was taking them. And so every time I went into a doctor's office, they'd hand me a prescription. Well, his prescription was, you're done. This is it. Go home. Stop bothering me. I can't fix you. And so I did. I took that prescription home, and I swear that I stared at that prescription of those words, that this is the way you're going to be the rest of your life, for a long time, like too long. I wasted so much time staring at those words on that paper that was the way it was going to be, that nothing was ever going to change.
Of course you would. Like, when we go to people in the medical industry in this scenario, we go there for answers, we go there for support, we go there for validation, we go there to, even at the very bare minimum, just be believed. And when that gets thrown back in your face and made out as if you're the problem and you're too hard, and so many even of my clients come to me and tell me that all they've been told their life is that they're in the too hard basket, and they've just been referred on or told to not come back, or that this is something they're going to live with forever. It is so heartbreaking to know that people in that level of power in our community use such diminishing and rightly inappropriate ways to describe that something is naturally a challenge, and even just admit that they don't know what to do about it. Right? Their ego is so, inflamed and taking the direction in that point, that they're just not willing to say that, you know what, I actually don't know how to help you, but you are worth helping. You know what I mean? I'm so sorry that happened to you, and I'm so sorry that happens to so many of our community and our people out there, from people that should actually be supporting all of us in our most vulnerable times.
Agreed. It's a shame. And it's really heartbreaking talking to so many people that are going through or have gone through the same thing, and just handed that prescription of another medication, spending 3 to 5 minutes in a room, pouring your heart out to somebody, and then they just hand you a prescription to mask symptoms, to not find out what the root cause is, and to really crack that foundation of hope for people, because when hope is lost, we lose a whole lot more than what we realize. When that hope is fractured, it's a really, really hard job to lift ourselves back up, to scramble up that hill again. Like I always say, I would gain some hope and I would think, okay, this is the next thing that's going to help me. And then I'd get pushed down the hill again, and I'd try and find some resilience, try and find some more energy or hope to get myself up again. And then I would slide back down that hill. And when somebody says something to you like what my doctor did, I'm not helping you anymore, you're never going to get better, I literally went home and I pulled a blanket up to my neck and I laid there for a long, long time, like way, way too long. And like I said, I had 4 young children running around, and all they saw was their mother with the blanket pulled up, with a complete loss of hope that I would ever be able to engage again.
And not just, I was going to say, and not just hope gets taken away from you, it's that trust. How do I trust anyone in any help service? How do I trust even myself? How do I trust people to be able to rely on them at a time where I can barely trust myself, you know?
Yeah. I didn't trust myself. I didn't know that I could, right? Because at that stage, I was so dependent on what they were telling me, because I didn't understand why my body was functioning the way it was. There was no correlation between my mind and my body whatsoever. And so I was looking to them to find that connection for me. But they spent, like I said, 3 to 5 minutes in an appointment with me. They didn't know what I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, physically, emotionally, situationally, spiritually. There's so much more to overcoming any situation in our lives than just a medication, than just a therapy, than just the next doctor's appointment. There's more work to be done than looking outside of ourselves to have someone else fix us. There are places and positions and scenarios where we need those things 100%. But it's finding the team that works for us and the things that work for us, and the tool belt, I call it, where we have these tools that are specific and unique to us. But we need to be part of that team. And I wasn't part of that team for a long time. I didn't understand or know that I had a part.
At what point did things begin to shift for you? Like, was there a pivotal moment when you realized the answers weren't going to come from external sources? Because once you receive a message like that, you believe the narrative, and you said you just kind of slipped into this, what sounds like a very depressed, isolated kind of state for way too long. When did that pivotal shift start, and what did that look like for you?
Well, I call it my catalyst moment. And I was lying on the couch. I could hear my kids playing in the backyard. They were always, my kids never sat. They were always, we lived in the country. They were always outside playing, and I loved being out there with them. And all of a sudden that was stripped from me, and I could hear them laughing, and I just wanted to be with them. And, when you're told over and over that there's nothing that can be done, when you're told to go home and just realize that this is the way you're going to be, you stop trying. You stop trying the next thing. And like you said, like there is a sense of depression, of hopelessness that takes that away from us, that I can even get off the couch and go and make myself tea. It's like your energy is stripped away from you as well, or your drive, or, and it becomes this great big snowball that just pulls you in. So this pivotal moment, I'm lying on the couch, 45-degree angle, dark glasses, earplugs. Here are my kids. And I said to God, I'm like, there's got to be something more. There's got to be a reason why I'm on this earth, and it is not to be lying on this couch day in and day out. There's no way that this is it, especially with 4 young children. And so that was the time right there. I remember just thinking, nothing's going to change until I change. I have to make the changes. It's not going to be the next medication, the next therapist appointment, the next research that comes out. And so, I have a background in kinesiology. I have a kinesiology degree. Like I understand the movement and I understand the body inside and out, but I wasn't applying it to myself. I couldn't see that I had a part in it. And that was when I started saying, if I don't change, nothing will change. And so it was small, tiny, little steps that brought me back to being not the same person that I was before, a completely different person than I was before. But that's okay. Like I used to say, I just want my life back. I just want my life back. But I don't want that life back at all. I don't want to be that, our house constantly moving, doing everything for everybody else, perfect house, perfect this, perfect that. I don't, that's no way to live. I was putting it like, now I say I was literally banging my head against the wall until I actually banged my head against the wall.
And I don't at all mean to imply that we deserve the accidents that happen to us that cause obviously significant chronic pain. No, but sometimes something pivotal happens because we've been stuck in such maladaptive ways of living that sooner or later something is going to give. And it might come from just a natural thing that happens because our body is enduring too much stress, or we might get physically ill just naturally that might come up, or we then endure something similar to what you did, Catherine, is because of just walking around, not realizing, not being probably mindful, an accident occurred and then it led to what you had to then endure. And it's interesting because I always, not to try and, silver line things, but I do like my clients to look at what has happened to them and ask what type of positive came, what they can take away in a positive way from something horrific that has happened. And it's not to at all minimize the impact of the trauma that you and others do go through, but it's also being able to say what was happening beforehand that, I'm choosing my words right wisely because I wanted to say that put me in this situation at risk of this occurring, but I do not at all want to instill a sense of blame around this. But it's that acknowledgement of, because I was overcompensating, I was running around like a headless chook, I was, juggling way too many balls, and whatever metaphor we want to use, I engaged in something mindlessly, I hurt myself, and then my life changed. It sounds like what you're saying there, there's a level of accountability that can be taken no matter what happens to us.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's something that it's very difficult to look in the mirror. And that's why I say we turn it around. But as we turn it around, the mirror starts to shine into our own face. And it's very difficult to realize that the choices and decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis, the stories that we tell ourselves, the habits that we have, are all contributing to what then happens in our body. Stuffing down emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Not speaking. Up for ourselves, being the giver all the time and never a receiver. I look at my accident now and I say it was the greatest gift that I was ever given. When I was in it for the years that I was on that couch, there's no way that I could have ever seen that this was going to be a gift. And
absolutely not.
There's an evolvement of our situations as we're going through them, and we have to go through them. We can't sidestep them because they're just going to show back up in our lives. But I did not have a happy marriage before my accident. It wasn't because of my accident that my marriage disintegrated. It was a really difficult marriage before. And me having my accident brought it up to something where I was really ignoring a lot of it, just trying to make it work, where my accident brought it up into full view of what the reality was. A gift. Now I'm with the most magical, amazing man, right? So a gift yet again. The things that I was doing in my life before did contribute. And I was having pain symptoms before. I was having major migraine issues before. I was having gut issues before. It was already starting to surface even before the accident. The accident was like, the moment that made it all happen. Like I said, I used to say, I want to have my life back. And I used to also say, my body's against me. Why is my body not getting better? Why is my body not healing? I was beating my body up on a daily basis. And that was part of my catalyst moment. Was I had to turn around and look in the mirror and see what I was doing. Lying on my couch day in, day out was not doing me any favors. We cannot lie in bed and lie on a couch 24 hours a day and expect our bodies to be thriving. But I had to learn how to move in a manner that was good for my body and that made my body feel good. And that didn't mean strapping on shoes and going for a 2-mile run. It didn't mean heading to the gym and joining the big exercise classes. I still can't do those things. And so as we turn around and we start to acknowledge our part in the mirror towards ourselves, we start to see the things that we can do. And the reason I don't know if you can see the lemons wallpaper I have here on the side. Life is going to give us lemons. Every single person that's listening to this podcast, every single person out there playing in the park, we all have lemons. And all of our lemons look different, but there's not one person we're ever going to speak to that hasn't had a story from their childhood, an event that has happened that has just shaken their world. We all have lemons. But I leave this blank for a reason, is this is the possibility. So what do I was choosing to focus on the lemons day in and day out. That was my whole life, my whole focus. And what we focus on grows bigger. And so now, whenever a lemon comes into my life, I acknowledge it. I see my part in it. I see the stories that I'm thinking about it. But then I say, what can I do now? What do I have control over? What do I have power over? I have power over the choice that I have to take the next step. And that's why this wall is blank, because it's limitless what the possibilities are. And so that's where the hope starts to come in. Because if we continue to focus on the lemons, we can't see that there's limes present. We can't see that there's possibilities present, that anything could get better.
But first, a word from our sponsor. Welcome to Self Reflections. Real people, real reflections. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to do it alone. We're not just your average service. A space to come home to yourself one session at a time. A sanctuary where you feel seen, heard, and held. We meet you where you are, online or in person. Providing support across the lifespan from little ones to adults. Nurturing your mind, body, and relationships. Real people, real reflections. Book now at selfreflections.com. I actually really loved your honesty around the level of resistance that you actually experienced first before moving into the ability to be able to even acknowledge that there's the option for limes to be present, and it's so real where in all aspects where resistance can show up as emotional avoidance, as helplessness, as blaming others, relying on others. And rightly so, they're all understandable responses to suffering. But if we stay there, and majority of us do like to wallow in it for a period of time, we feed that victim mindset. The brain starts to wire itself around pain, fear, and protection. And I love the analogy that, the looking in the mirror analogy. It's finally taking responsibility for what you can control. And just like you said, your life, in your life, you can't then go and, take that, if we use kilometers, you use miles, but a very long run nonetheless, you still can't do that. But that doesn't mean that you can't then move your body in whatever way it speaks to what feels comfortable for you. It is a confronting experience to have to look in the mirror, to take that responsibility, to pull yourself out of that victim mindset, because our coping modes just want to protect us, and they very much believe that if we do anything different than just be in comfort, that it's going to be uncomfortable, painful, unbearable. And so we keep being addicted to the avoidance, to relying on others, to anything that's actually going to feel what we consider safe. But in reality, all that's doing is, again, creating that resistance rather than responsibility. And I love that you've identified the difference between the two of, hey, these are all the lemons, right, that life is throwing at you. And there's this blank canvas here on this side where you can create whatever you want. And I love that you actually identified that it's blank, because you might not know what will be the line on that side. You might not yet know what that looks like. You might not know what it is. No one's gonna, no one's blank slate is gonna look exactly like somebody else's. Like that you have to develop on your own based on your capacity, your pain threshold, your mindset, which naturally is going to change and blossom over a period of time.
Absolutely. It's when our brain is so filled with lemons, like I say, a truckload of lemons dumped in the middle of your living room, like, you got them. But if we can shift to say, what's in store for me now, right? What is possible? What can happen? But also, what happens is when we stop focusing on the lemons and be open to what the possibilities are, getting rid of the yeah buts. Yeah, but my story is this. Yeah, but I'm never going to be able to walk properly again. Yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. Yeah, but I'll never be able to get on an airplane again. Yeah, but okay, those may be the lemons, and yes, they may be 100% true, but there are lines in those scenarios and situations where you can embrace the life that you have now. My life looks nothing the same. And I have now embraced it, right? I'm helping thousands of people to overcome chronic pain. I've written a book. I'm coaching people. I'm traveling the world speaking, right? Did I think in the moment when the lemons were everywhere in my living room, did I ever think that I would be thriving? That I couldn't wait to put my feet on the floor in the morning? No, I couldn't. But as I started to turn and pivot towards what possibility meant for me, things started to open up. So I was able to take a small step towards those possibilities, and my path just started coming towards me. As I was taking those steps, it unfolded in front of me. When we stop sitting in the resistance, like you say, and any decision we ever make, within 6 seconds, our brain is going to try to talk us out of it.
Yes.
Right? It's the way we're wired. And so it's, I love Mel Robbins' 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, because that reduces that 6 seconds, and it's taking that next step. And the only way to overcome is through action. And it's not through comfort. It's through doing something different. And sometimes we don't know what to replace our lemons with. The lemons have been our identity for so long. They were for me. They were my identity. They were who I was. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay. In my book, I wrote about one of my coaches, and I wouldn't be here today without this one coach. Her name is Nancy. And she gave me a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, and she said, draw your life. And I put myself in the middle, just a circle. And on the outside, I have all of these doors, just all on the outside. And and I handed it back to her, and she said, tell me about it. So I said, well, these are all the doors. Like, this is relationships. This is vocation. This is my faith. This is friendships. This is, all of the items of my life, the ripples in my life. And the circle inside was me standing in the middle, not knowing what to do. I felt like, and I said to her, I feel like I'm in a waiting room, and I'm just waiting, and I don't know where to go. So I'm so grateful for her. She took this sheet of paper and she taped four sheets, one on the top, one on the edges, all around. So I had this great big, and she said, go home and fill up the rooms. Like, what do you want your relationships to look like? What do you want your vocation to look like? What do you want your faith to look like? What you want your friendships to look like? And so I no longer, I was working with a blank slate, but I was starting to dream. I was starting to have a vision of what I wanted. Instead of being so consumed with what was wrong, I could start to consume myself with what could be right. And it was going to look different. because I really did have a blank slate.
And what you've identified there is actually starting to take that first step. Your dreams of each room could be as outlandish as you want them to be, because in that moment, they're still not going to feel like anything you can achieve. But it's so important for anyone listening, when you are looking at these domains, anything that you're going to put in there, there's going to be a part of you that's not going to believe you're going to be able to either achieve it, do it, or be deserving of it. So irrespective of that, having some sense of, in the perfect world, this is what I want this to look like. And even just setting up that as a first starting point, you can then, through whether it's self-reflective practice or through the help with other people or professionals, you can then start to ascertain, what are the steps for me to get there? And you might actually build something even greater, as you start putting in the work. It might even surpass that. Other things you might need to tweak because physically or mentally or financially you might not actually yet be able to obtain that, but it doesn't mean that the journey stops. It might just be that, okay, the length between me and that door or that segment, I can't get that exact thing right this very moment, but I can get versions of that throughout my life. And if I keep working on it, sooner or later that will come to fruition, and I can even surpass that at certain points. And I love that you've identified this significance of agency. It's this idea and sense that we have some power over our internal and external world, even though we cannot change some of the lemons that we've been identifying or have been hindering us up until this point. So it sounds like even just through that small exercise, you were able to take some form of responsibility to start changing your relationship, not only with your life, but then also your mindset. How did that actually then impact your pain and your relationship with your body suffering with pain?
That was the incredible part. And this is what I see so much with my clients, even with people who have had pain for 37 years, this isn't a client, but this is an example. I just love this. I've interviewed her a number of times, and she focuses on the same kind of practices that I coach my clients. But she, 37 years in chronic pain, couldn't sit in a car, couldn't sit at the dining room table. She laid on the floor in the kitchen and actually wore like a bald spot on the linoleum floor where the paint is all off. And 37 years believing that nothing was ever going to change. And once you realize the power that you have over what happens in your body, like I still have symptoms, but I manage them now so they don't manage me. And this practice of coming towards the situations, towards the symptoms, towards the messages that the body is giving us, and dancing with that, and it starts to become a relationship. Instead of my body and my mind are two different entities, and my body's against me, and the way that we speak to our body, with the way we speak, the way I spoke to myself, I would never speak to anybody else that way. And so there's a huge amount of accountability. Like once we start to acknowledge what is, but then this is part of my framework that I've created, the ARC framework, is the second A, it's AARC, acknowledge is the first one. That's the mirror. That's when we get to bring the mirror up. But then the accountability is those first steps, those first changes, the mindset changes, taking responsibility for the stories, meeting ourselves, leaning into it instead of trying to sidestep and staying comfortable. But then what happens is we get to go into reframe. We get to reframe how it is that we think about things, reframe the way we do things on a regular basis. And so all of a sudden, the symptoms stop being the focus. It's no longer the lemons. The symptoms stop being the focus. And it's like, okay, what is this symptom trying to tell me? Am I going to die with this symptom? I'm not going to die. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. But what can I do to soften that? What can I, and so it becomes a partnership. And once we start to partner with our body, and this is what I really coach people, because there's a huge amount of resistance to it. And I'd love to talk about a secondary, like there are secondary gains sometimes for hanging on to lemons.
Completely.
And so I don't know if you want to go there, but for me, I started realizing that I did and I was capable of having a life again. It just was not going to look the same. And there was a whole lot of decisions on my part, and I didn't realize how much power over my symptoms I had until I started to really lean in and partner, just the same as my clients do, just the same as this woman that I've interviewed a couple of times who was 37 years. She's now hiking and biking and living her life. And there's so much power in our thoughts and in our minds that we don't give that credit to. We think it's outside of ourselves.
I really like that you've identified this relationship we have with our illness. And I do have a majority of my clients have to go through this in their therapeutic journey, whether we specifically name it as such or whether it just naturally happens. But it's not uncommon for us to have a reason why we're latching on. And it might be because it's the only way people will show care or love to us. It's the only way that we will receive help. It's the only way that people believe us. It's, or there is comfort in it, right? If I really immerse myself in this, whether it is a physical pain or whether it's an emotional, psychological pain, when we immerse ourselves in that, not only does it become part of our identity, we don't know who we are without it, right? So many of my clients are now going through the process of EMDR when it comes to their trauma healing. And one of the things that is coming up is, who am I without my trauma? Who am I going to be? What's life going to look like? And that's a very scary, vulnerable thing to have to go through. It's the same with physical chronic pain. And irrespective of, again, whether it's a mental illness, physical illness, access to services, access to medical support, access to community, all there are positive things associated with having mental illness and physical illness, that as you go through your healing journey, there is a significant fear of losing the identity of self, but also then losing the positive aspects of having said illness.
Yes. And I was one of those people. Absolutely. And it's hard to say. It's hard, that part of the acknowledgement and accountability is really hard. And that's why turning the mirror around, it's not an easy process. And it's so important to have somebody walking through it with you, because there are things about ourselves that we don't see. I call them sticky bits, cracks, something that, we need to have somebody who understands, who's been there, who understands what transformation is, but also to hold us accountable for one, but to actually do it with non-judgmentally. So there's no shame in it, right? That filled a purpose for me for a long time. And there are gifts in it, but it doesn't mean that I have to stay there. And there were a whole lot of secondary gains for me to hold on to certain aspects. But there was also a lot of fear around not having it. Who was I going to be? Was I going to have to be more responsible? How was I going to care for myself? All of these things. I've never spoken about this just with my clients, but never in a podcast. But, those secondary gains hold us back a lot. And sometimes we have a story in our head, and who are we without that story? I have a client the other day who said, if I don't say that story, it means my mom was a good person, was a good mom. And so how do we remove that attachment to the story so that we can still heal through it and not hold on to it, so that it impacts us still in our adult years? And so a lot of the things that were holding me back had nothing to do with chronic pain.
No. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it beautifully moves us on to a topic I want to talk about with you, Catherine, is that mind-body connection and what it actually looks like to then start that healing journey. And I know you have mentioned that you have a kinesiology background and speak very passionately about the mind-body connection. As majority of the time I do with my trauma work, it's imperative that there has to be a mind-body connection. Can you share how this knowledge helped you shift from that fear, that shame, using those secondary gains into what looks like a bit of a healing journey for you, or had looked like?
The mind-body connection is paramount, especially for overcoming chronic pain. So often we get a diagnosis and we think we have to wrap ourselves in bubble wrap and not move. You know, the doctor told me I have bone spurs on my spine. I'm not going to move. Worst thing you could do. But we step into fear. We step into, if I move, I'm going to get a flare. And you see, we're used to being that 21-year-old who can do anything, right? And, you know, we felt a little bit bloated from the weekend, and we would do 15 sit-ups and 15 push-ups, and we would get back, feel that our body was right back. I remember that's the way I used to be. I'm like, oh, I'm getting a little pudgy. I'll do a couple of push-ups, and away I go. I felt great again. But, you know, when we have chronic pain, when we have symptoms, when we have a diagnosis, it's different. Our body needs us to respond in a different way. We are no longer that healthy, brilliant, you know, young-bodied person. So often I hear people say, well, that's the way I've always done it. It may be the way you've always done it, but like I said, we need to pivot and look at what is possible. What is the reality of what we're dealing with? And so the mind-body connection is looking at the reality of what is. And so moving our body with that mindset of what can it do, not what we think it should do, but what can it do. And so we're meeting it exactly where it is. So I have 2 grandbabies. One is going to be a year next week, and she's just learning to walk. But she's not just going to take all of her steps in one day. She's taken a couple of steps now, but you know, nobody's angry at her for taking a couple steps and then going down onto her hands and knees. It's the process, right? And so her muscles are learning how to hold herself up. Her muscles are learning now to balance on one foot as she gets the other foot in front. This is a process, and this is how we need to approach ourselves when we're starting anew again. We really are starting anew again. We're learning to walk. And, you know, if we've wrapped ourselves in bubble wrap for a long time, which I know I did for a long, long time, I couldn't just, like I said, strap on shoes and go for a big run or go to the gym. So, and this is what I coach is we go and we meet our body exactly where it is. And we're curious. Come towards yourself with some curiosity and say, okay, if I lift my shoulders up towards my ears and down, is there any discomfort there? No, that actually felt okay. Actually, it felt like a little bit of a stretch. When I stretch, yes, there may be a little discomfort, but it's not pain. What's the difference between discomfort, stretch, and pain? And so we start to have a relationship with sensations instead of thinking any sensation is bad, because that's what happens. Our brain all of a sudden thinks that any sensation is a bad sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And so approaching with curiosity allows our brain and our body to start talking to one another. And the only way that our body can speak is through sensation.
Yes.
It doesn't have words. It's like my 1-year-old granddaughter. She can't speak. She has to use body language. She has to use eye contact. She has to, you know, and it's the same with our body. Our body is using symptoms and sensations and heat and cold and all of these things to speak to us. And so, you know, we're not powerless to the sensations of our body. And this is where the agency comes back into it, is how we can actually spend time. And so part of my program, I provide mobility videos, but they meet you where you are. They start you right off in your bed. Like you wake up in the morning, you put this video on, and you start the relationship with your body right there in bed. So before your feet even hit the floor, you've started a conversation. It's like saying good morning to your partner. You're starting a conversation. How was your sleep? You're asking your body, how was your sleep? How do you feel this morning? My hip feels a little tight. I'm going to spend a little time with you, mm-hmm. right? Just like if your partner's like, I'm really struggling right now, I could use a little time with you. It's the same thing. And so what happens is the trust builds. And this is what this mind-body connection, the trust builds. And so now when my body starts to have a symptom or a sensation, I go to it quickly. I meet it. I ask it what it needs. I provide what it needs. We go back and forth a little bit, curiosity, and then it doesn't go into the flare. Because it used to be that I would feel like, oh, I feel great today. I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. And then I'm down for 3 days. And this is where people are like, I go into a flare. And this is so important, is learning this dance. I never have flares anymore.
Yeah. You've touched on a really important point, and so many of my clients are coming to mind. And this is, those that suffer with chronic fatigue, these that suffer with fibromyalgia, with so many chronic physical health issues. And it is this, I feel okay, so I'm now going to try and do as much as I possibly can, because there is that, thought that it's not going to be okay forever, but they don't realize, and this is what we try and teach as well in my practice too, whether it's mental health or physical health, it's taking it even gently when you are feeling good, so that you don't have these really, really high highs and really, really low lows. And it's interesting you're talking about it in the same way that we would be applying for emotions with mental health, right? It's sensations with physical health, emotions with mental health. It's if you're able to tap into what your body is trying to tell you through these, you're going to be able to actually decipher. These are the keys. And I use the example of, this is your check engine light, right? Just as your car is going to have the check engine light that tells you your car needs a service or needs something done to it, you go and book your appointment with your mechanic. You go get it in, the mechanic fixes it, and then you no longer have a significant issue, right? If you leave that check engine light going for months and months on end, next minute your whole engine's blowing up, right? And then we wonder why. So it's actually, bringing that back to that agency we were talking about. It's acknowledging that if, you need to notice those signs in the most earliest of times, and actually spending time with that. And I've actually, funny enough, never heard this before, where people actually work with others in bed before anything else. It's so easy for us to say, okay, go do breath work and go do, walking and get in the sunshine and go do a doing thing that's going to be helpful for your mental and physical health. But we really, really minimize the importance of actually doing simple tasks at the most basic of way, to be able to connect with exactly what it is that we need in a way that's achievable. That's very, very important for our community to highlight. I love that you've identified that.
It's so important to, and this is why I love my ARC framework. It meets you exactly where you are. It's not saying you've got to get here before you can start. It's right here, exactly where you are. And for so many that I work with, they haven't done anything like I hadn't done anything for years lying on a couch. I couldn't get to here first to be able to start. And so that's why it started in my bed. I have the kinesiology understanding. I have all the mobility courses and programs that I've taken, but we meet ourselves where we are and start there, because otherwise it just feels so overwhelming. There's too much. I can't handle that. And then the fear flows in. So if we all have to get up and go to the bathroom,
That's true.
So why not start right there and then, just before you get up? If you can wait for 50 seconds, a minute, and just have a quick check-in, your day starts off in a different manner. Instead of saying, this is going to be a bad pain day, we're already pre-framing how it is that we're going to feel. We can actually say, I actually feel pretty good today, and I need to spend a little bit more time in this area with the information that my body's giving me. It's the power of the small steps.
Completely.
I wouldn't be here today without those small, minute. You almost think that they're unimportant steps, but they're so powerful.
Thank you for sharing that. And to take us then a little bit deeper, what are some tangible practices or mindset shifts you would suggest to our listeners who might be feeling stuck in pain or hopelessness?
I think understanding that we are what we think is really important. This is a little book, 1902, As a Man Thinketh. The wording is humongous. But what we think, the power of our thought, has so much more impact on how we feel. If we pre-frame our day and say it's going to be a bad pain day, it's going to be a bad pain day.
Completely.
If we pre-frame before we're meeting a friend for lunch, I'm not going to be able to make it through lunch. You're not going to be able to make it through lunch. The words that we're telling ourselves on a moment by moment basis are so powerful. I think if I leave the audience with one thing today, it would be that. I take my clients when I first meet them through an exercise. I don't know if you're open to doing
Absolutely.
it.
Yes.
Okay. So it's just an imagery exercise. Just notice as we're going through this exercise what your body is doing.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm actually going to do it with our community.
Okay, actually do it.
Okay.
It's pretty interesting. Okay, so if you wish, close your eyes. You don't have to. And just settle into the surface beneath you. Take a couple big breaths. Just kind of start noticing what is happening in your body at this moment. Relax your shoulders, your jaw, that little space between your eyebrows. And imagine that I am placing in front of you a great big yellow lemon sitting on a cutting board. And you're going to take the knife that is sitting beside the lemon and you're going to take some slices out of that lemon. It's so juicy that the juice is squirting up into the air. You can already smell it as you're slicing those slices. The juice is pooling down underneath the lemon. So once you have a couple of lemons, slices, pick one up and bring it up towards your nose and smell it. It smells sweet. It smells tangy. Just notice the sensations. And you're noticing that even some of the juice is starting to flow down your fingers, down your arm. Now we're going to take that slice of lemon and we're going to take a great big suck out of that lemon. Big, juicy suck of lemon juice flows into your mouth. It is sour. Feel the tanginess or the sourness along the sides of your tongue even. Maybe not a pleasant experience. We love lemon in our water, but that's diluted. We're not used to just sucking a lemon. So when you're ready, open your eyes. Come back to me and tell me the physical sensations that you experienced during this exercise.
So for me, I noticed my mouth starting to salivate. I noticed like my body twitching, as I'm sure if you're watching this on our YouTube, you'll be able to see that. You'd saw my face kind of go in and make that kind of like, especially when we were talking about putting the lemon in my mouth, because again, you get this hit, this actual hit. You know, when it comes to imagery, we genuinely, our body doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So the body is actually having the physiological sensations as if you were actually eating the lemon. And what then I noticed as well, and this is why I actually really love lemon, is then after the really, really sour taste, you get this pull through of a sweet aftertaste. I don't know if anyone experiences this as well. And then I actually noticed this like a array of like pleasurable sensations of like, oh, that actually feels nice. Now it's moved through from discomfort to now actually feeling quite comfortable, and I feel quite settled, and you know, and it was able to move me through that. So, you know, it'd be really interesting to hear what our community as well, and as please put your experiences down in the comments below to see what physical sensations you experienced. But that was my experience.
Well, and that's a very common experience. We pucker. We have resistance. We don't want to do it. We already, like the pre-frame, what we were talking about before, we already know what our body's going to do, right? But Klaudia, was there a lemon present?
No.
But your mouth salivated.
Yeah.
Your body tensed up.
Yeah.
You puckered. You felt the
Yeah.
tang or the tartness on the sides of
Completely.
your tongue.
I
Yeah.
even had the visceral reaction of like what I would normally have if I did have a lemon in my mouth, you know?
Right. Yeah. And so this is so powerful. I love this exercise, and it's really a lot of why I wrote, my tagline, "When Life Gives You Lemons," because I use this example a lot. But what this does is this shows us that the power of our thoughts actually can change the cellular structure of our body.
It becomes our reality.
It's the reality. Our body doesn't know the difference between the thought, and the actual happening of the event. There was no lemon present. There was no cutting board. There was no juice running down. There was no juice flowing in. But your body didn't know the difference. I'm still salivating, even just by saying it to you, I'm still salivating more. And so the power of the lemon, the power of the thought, if our audience can remember this one thing from this podcast, is our thoughts play so much more impact on our day-to-day lives. What we say to ourselves, what we think to ourselves, what we say to other people, what we think. As a man thinks, what you think is, where our thoughts and our words have the power to give life, and they have the power to give death. And if we start to really, really understand me saying my body's against me, I don't even like saying it anymore because I don't want my body to hear that. If we would say that to our partner, "You're against me, you're against me, you're against me," how long would it take to erode that relationship with our partner?
Mm-hmm.
How long
Very
will it
quickly.
take for us to erode the relationship with our body so that our body and our minds are not connecting?
And to add to that, some additional tips, we want people to feel like they can validate their pain. It is real and it does deserve compassion, and it's there for a reason. Whether it happened because of an accident or happened because of a physical illness, for whatever reason, if there's chronic pain, it's there. We don't ever want individuals to feel like they can't own that and be believed that that is a real tangible thing that they are experiencing. We also want people to know that you have aspects of your life, whether it's internal or external, that you can control. Learn what those things are and slowly start to put your energy into those things rather than those things that you have no control over. Try, maybe on a daily basis, just like Catherine mentioned earlier, check in with yourself. Ask, what do you actually need? What are those sensations or emotions or visceral reactions in your body? What are they trying to tell you that you might need? And are you actually giving your body what it's calling out for? Other things I'm kind of thinking of is maybe even writing a letter to that part of you that is suffering. Sometimes we want to, not give it any attention because we think if we give it attention, it's going to exacerbate it. Sometimes even just the acknowledgement and being able to connect or communicate to that part of you that is suffering is actually going to be really helpful, because there is a part of you that doesn't want to experience the pain and wants to do the work and wants to move on. And there is also a part of you that is suffering and feeling hopeless and feeling sometimes helpless. So knowing that there are different parts of you that you can learn how to tap into and better your relationships with is going to then in the big scheme of things help you move into a life that looks different from what it was before, but still is very, very fulfilling. And that, there is pain, but that doesn't mean that there's no hope. There is a way to be able to live with both, and as we are then refocusing our attention on a life that is worth living, our attention then stops being so enmeshed with the pain, which means that that pain is not going to be exacerbated more than it needs to. It doesn't have to be, an alarm system that's going off 24/7, but if you're constantly putting your attention on it, of course it's going to be, because it's going to think that it's protecting you, but really it's hindering you. So without falling into avoidance, you can redirect your attention in the things, the limes, for example, like Catherine was mentioning. The limes in your life, if you refocus your attention on that, you're going to notice that the pain may still be there, but the intensity of it has decreased, the frequency of it, the duration of it may decrease, and you might even have pockets that you don't even realize that it's there, or it does not come up at certain points of your day. So that's super, super important. And going off the segment we just talked about around the connection between mind and body, engage in somatic practices. Get back into your body, understand your body, connect to your breath, connect to just being present in what's going on there, because that in itself is going to slowly start to rewire your nervous system to then overall help you with the tolerance of pain, should pain be something that's going to be long-term in your life.
Absolutely. 100%. We are speaking the same language. It really makes me, again, I'm going to bring up my granddaughter in her inability to speak. That she, we come to her when she is needing something, right? Like she may be whining, she can't quite reach something, or she can't open something and she's whining. We don't ignore her, because if we ignore her, what's going to happen?
Well, she'll escalate.
Yeah, right? It's the same with our body, and I appreciate that you picked up on that. That was a missing piece, that it's not about ignoring the fact that things are. There's an acknowledgement of what things are, and it's going to it, and it's coming to it with grace and love and understanding and curiosity. The same as I would if I heard my granddaughter whining, I would come to her with grace and love and curiosity. What do you need? I would be asking questions. And if we can learn to do that to ourselves instead of being judgmental to what is, the whole relationship starts to shift. You really do start to learn to love yourself as it is, instead of judging it and wanting it to be different. And there's a lot of healing in that.
Completely. Catherine, your story is very powerful, and I thank you for your honesty, vulnerability, and for the work that you keep doing for the world to support others in their own pain. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. And before we wrap up, I always ask my guests this: if you could go back and say one thing to your past self in that really, really dark space that you were in, what would it be?
I think I would say, you're not broken. You're not broken. You're not too far gone. And you don't have to settle to just survive any longer. You deserve more than building a life around symptoms, around the lemons. You deserve joy. You deserve connection. And you really can embrace the life that you have, even with the diagnosis.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your time. And of course, all of Catherine's details will be in the description below, and the links to not only her book, but the books she's mentioned will be down there as well. Catherine, again, thank you very much for your story and being a wonderful, wonderful part on the Self Reflections podcast. And for our listeners, I hope this episode reminds you that while pain may be part of your story, it doesn't have to be the whole book. For our community, thank you so much for tuning into the Self Reflections podcast. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Until next time, take care and keep reflecting.